So I'd like to also introduce our next speaker, Hanqin Zhao, with his presentation, The Dialectics of Everyday Campus Design, Transformation and the Neglected Battle of Strategy and Tactic, a case study of Harvard Yard, I had to get that in, sorry, and Berkeley Sproul Plaza. Thank you so much.
All right, good morning. Thank you. It's a great pleasure to be here. I appreciate that the committee accepted my proposal so I can finally crystallize this idea that's been hanging around in my mind for quite some time into a written format. And appreciate the stage for me to experiment the idea, and hopefully I can collect some feedbacks to make it better. My name is Hanqin Zhao. I'm a PhD student and a lecturer at UC Berkeley, Department of Landscape Architecture and Environmental Planning. I'm also pursuing a designated emphasis in folklore, which is like a minor for PhD student at Berkeley. The paper uses concept of desire path and the self-visualization or formalization as an entry point to analyze the dialectic of progression of the everyday campus improvements and how they override unrecorded history and reinforce the top-down control. Then I will expand the idea in case studies to show how both parties, the provider and the receiver of the design, of the physical change, are trapped in the system and merely making decisions to accept them or accept them unconsciously. The goal is to provide an alternative aspect of criticizing the everyday practice and design. The case studies I have today are not comparative studies, just in case that's something you're expecting. They are rather individual examples that support my argument as it proceeds. And this is the outline. Sorry about that. So the phenomenon of desire path has a long natural and cultural history. The conceptualization happened in the mid-20th century, but the term only received extended attention from academia and the public in the past few decades. Its name varies in different cultures, sometimes called a desire line, a call path, or elephant path. As intuitive as the name sounds, the desire path represents the desirable route that takes people to the desired place. It's an unplanned and spontaneous trail that resulted from repeated foot or wheel traffic over vegetation, most commonly. Pedestrians may collectively contribute to its formation due to the similar preference for shortcuts or ease, or when the constructed alternative is out of sight. This path quickly becomes self-reinforcing. They attract followers to further enhance the path's visibility. It can be a constant negotiation between the users and planners. So Harvard Yard at Harvard University has one of the most iconic networks of campus paths, resulting from the idea of desire path. The absence of the geometric composition hardly intrigue pedestrians to wonder if there is really a designer behind this. One would rather think it is a good set of pathways that naturally came to be. The Harvard Yard is gradually framed by the structures and buildings constructed from the early 18th centuries to the late 20th century. Rapid campus development occurred at the turn of the 20th century under the presidency of Charles W. Eliot. As architectural historian Barbridge Bunting recorded, in the 233 years preceding Eliot's election, Harvard had erected or purchased something like 34 substantial structures. But during Eliot's 40 years term, 35 new structures or major enlargements were created. So as you can see, the drawing on the left is a plan of 1856. It was actually surveyed by Eliot himself and his students while he was teaching trigonometry at Harvard, as he believed that one should learn from the practice. And the one on the right is from 1909, at the end of Eliot's administration. The intersecting network of paths long existed before Eliot's date, focusing on his presidency only because the changing progress is more visible in his time. As the building rose in a relatively short period, the new layout and the buildings changed people's walking routine. Students and the faculties traversed on the lawn in between and formed an informal network of intersecting dirt paths that were eventually formalized into paved walkways. Following that tradition, during the 1993 Harvard Yard renovation, in addition to repaving the existing yard pathways with asphalt, the university and the landscape architect decided to pave a few more trodden paths that, until this renovation, had been blocked with signs and replanted every year to stop people from traversing. This romantic design process at Harvard Yard with minimum design effort is a typical realization of a desired path. So in a Reddit group named after desired path, enthusiasts collectively identify, record, share, and discuss the desired path they encountered in everyday life. In this group of over 370,000 subscribers, the opinions of the posts and the comments fall into three very general categories about desired path. First is desired path shows the failure of design. The former design didn't anticipate people's needs. And the second is attempts to fix the desired path as a failures of repression. For example, putting up signage or physical barriers to curb and reshape people's trespassing usually resulted in creating new desired paths near the previous ones. Third, officialization or realization of the desired path as a fine, decent solution. People often praise the new pavement installed based on the previous desired path. So on the one hand, a token failure of power evokes a natural pleasure of successful resistance among people. On the other hand, the recognition from the ruling power and the officialization of the grassroots intervention indicate the triumph of the people. For many participants in this daily practice of creating or paving desired path, the activities are too ubiquitous and inarticulable to cognize and internalize. Perhaps many would rather see them as two consecutive parts of a healthy linear progress. People have spoken, and the state responded. The authorities' recognition is an ultimate goal of the resistance, hence, people praise the designers and the governments who paved the new official path based on the desired path. So letting user lead the way in realizing the desired path is indeed a strategy in environmental design. According to various resources, planners in Finland visit parks after the first snowfall to observe the footprint left by people and use the information to guide or improve their path design. Austrian architect Christopher Alexander and his team also framed this design thinking in their guidebook, A Pattern Language. And I quote, "The layout of path will seem right and comfortable only when it is compatible with the process of walking. And the process of walking is far more subtle than one might imagine." Harvard is not the only university that has taken this approach. Virginia Tech Campus News proudly reported how the university designed the drill field in such a way, and Michigan State University also reported how campus planners submitted and laid a sidewalk on the desired path. Ohio State University has a story of campus planners riding a hot air balloon and taking note of the traces on the snow. People on social media platforms have also shared stories of how identical procedures happened to the university they attended, which they heard and then spread among friends, alums, and family members. This includes UC Berkeley, Ohio University, Arkansas, just to name a few. So the concept of realizing the desired path is immensely instructive and for understanding any bottom-up expression of human desire that later receives recognition from a ruling power. The concept extended into other disciplines too, such as software design, human-computer interaction, business marketing. The analogy can work positively for either the top and the bottom of the power structure, or the users and the service provider. So from finished park design to the university campus path, The stories are popular because the people enjoy believing that the power of the people and the wisdom of the crowds lead to a better, humane, and democratic manner of decision-making and rule-changing. Those stories, although apocryphal, are so innocuous and entertaining that they slip out of the mouth like a fable. This vastly relatable practice of everyday life has been romanticized and even folklorized into superficially inspiring concept. This folklorization, however, distracts people from considering the dialectics of the formalization process itself. It's not only a story of recognition and officialization, but also the disappearance of a path by paving it. In other words, what has the improvement of pathway taken away from us? So before answering the question, I want to reiterate the importance of walking that we sometimes take for granted. Steps on the ground, in Michel de Sauteur's words, is a style of tactile apprehension and kinesthetic appropriation. Their intertwined path gave their shape to the spaces. They weave places together. In that respect, pedestrian movement from one of these real systems who exist, in fact, makes up the city. So according to de Sauteur, one could draw some lines on the city maps to represent the path and the trajectories of getting to places. Don't we all do that? Think about how the blue lines on the Google Maps when we start the navigation. But the lines cannot trace the act itself of passing by, or the operation of walking itself, the act itself. The lines allow us to grasp only a relic set in the notion of a surface of projection. The lines itself invisible, it has the effect of making, the lines itself visible, it has the effect of making invisible the operation that made it possible. These fixations constitute the procedures of forgetting. The trace left behind is substituted for the practice. So in other words, the path and the trajectories have replaced the operation itself, the operation for walking itself. However, the desired path is an exception. The trace is the practice, because the bare ground has the effect of making visible the operation that made it possible. It is trace untraceable on the map because it only belongs to the people. I mean, except on your maps, I think, because you position yourself among people. So the formalization of the desired path may seem like an intuitive and minimalistic design practice, and one could optimistically claim that the universities and other places of authorities have respected this time-tested layout based on users' behavior. However, pedestrians often neglect how the formalization of the path overrides their walking experience. The trodden dirt embodies a self-initiated but peer-supported walking experience in the open public space, and the resisting experience partially suppressed by social etiquette established through design strategies. This tactic is inattentive and unconscious, as silent as the pavement that overrides everyday history. Although geographically identical to the bare ground path, the paved path no longer challenges anyone to initiate or follow a tactic of resistance. And it inevitably tarnishes and even eliminates the inventory traces of a tactic. The paving strategies frame the walking experience as a rigid and functional movement that generates mere conventional yet unconscious obedience. It made permanent a sense of completeness and changelessness. Oftentimes, that is residents' perception of urban public space. The construction and the changes are only temporary, and to be within it is to develop a familiarity without even thinking about it. People take top-down infrastructures for granted, especially when their spatial desire align with the system. And people unconsciously dissociate the act of walking from obedience to power, since it is such an intuitive and personal behavior. However, the alignment of power, whether deliberately or not, happens in a much more immersive way in everyday life. This idea has been discussed by French philosopher Gilles Deleuze in 1990s. building upon Michel Foucault's disciplinary society, Deleuze challenges and extended the concept of in his postscript on the societies of control. Deleuze thinks that we are transitioning from a disciplinary society to a society of control, in which the power is no longer merely exercised through institutions like schools, prisons, factories, hospitals, by using contemplation, judgments, examination, and measurements to control and standardize individual behavior. That's Foucault's idea. But instead, Deleuze thinks in a society of control, the power is dispersed beyond the enclosed system into everyday life and disguised under freedom. One who was curbed from accessing the media in a disciplinary society is now attracted and encouraged by various means so that one's personal data can be collected, and one is only exposed to customized information. You know, when you watch one cat videos and suddenly there are 10 cats lining up, waiting to be swiped up. The control is dissolved in the finer grains of the invisible ordinariness rather than expressed through the vigilance and the threat of surveillance and potential consequences. So that's Foucault's idea too. In one of his less famous texts, Deleuze says, control is not a discipline. You do not confine people with a highway, but by making highways, you multiply the means of control. I'm not saying this is the only aim of highways, but people can travel infinitely and freely without being confined while being perfectly controlled. This is our future. And he wrote this in 1990s, and we are 30 years later, so we're already in his future, technically. So similarly, I'm not suggesting that we leave the bare ground unpaved, or we just all go outside and pry up all the sidewalks. I would suggest, however, keeping in mind that the synthesis of retaining the operation of walking and making physical progression allows us to see the overlooked power control and analyze the overwriting of unrecorded history in the built environment. In such a system, people are unconsciously pulled back to the regime of control once deviated from the designated path, not by disciplines, but by what appears to be an improved development that suits people's needs. Hence, people are given a new path that only loops them back to the last security checkpoint. What appears to be a continuous improvement of the built environment is actually a continuous improvement of control, but it is more pleasant. So that is my main argument. For the rest of the paper, I will follow that thought to review some case studies I identified at UC Berkeley. So the alignment are exercised through both walking and seeing. How are they implemented through design strategies? Here is an example. At the northeast corner of Berkeley Memorial Glade, a desire path was first recorded in 2000 that serves as an extension. So here, in case you don't see. It serves as an extension of an existing pathway perpendicular to the vehicular road that wraps the glade. And the students naturally cross the road to reach the glade. And another photo in the middle, taken in 2003, shows that the desire path disappeared temporarily. Photo here, 2003, as the university built a wooden fence. The message is clear, and this short blockage at least breaks the concentrated pattern into individual ones. Although the trespassing still exists, the sense of collectivity is lifted. In the photo taken in 2015, which I took 2 weeks ago, the landscape has changed quite a bit in the past 20 years. Plan works better. So 2025. The landscape has changed quite a bit in the past 20 years, not in layout, but in material, vegetation, and topography. In other words, the space progressed gradually, and it is only noticeable in comparing the photos taken 20 years apart. The trees are thicker and higher, blocking the continuity of seeing the glade. So that's the glade. Not only has the desired path disappeared, but the desire is also reduced. In addition, the university replaced the lawn on both sides of the road with the walkable mulch. Mulch is essentially not a pavement, but it grants legitimate walkability. It makes the cheapest plaza. It supports and covers every single possible desired path that could ever occur on the ground, but it can't afford anything else that a plaza does. Unlike the shiny surface, unlike the shiny surface on the concrete curb that clearly shows someone's skateboard there and is skateboardable, or the whiteout mark on the red brick, no traces will be left on mulch. The operation of walking and the resistance are hence swallowed by the given walkability. And on the other side of the campus, the Sproul Plaza shows another example of control. The Cedar Gate, here, facing the Telegraph Avenue at Berkeley, marks the original southern campus entrance and the boundary between the campus and the city of Berkeley. In the 1950s, the university purchased the land in front of the Cedar Gate, and the landscape architect Lawrence Halperin designed the Sproul Plaza on it. The plaza consists of upper and lower plazas connected with a set of stairs due to the huge elevation change on Berkeley Hills. And the upper one took the place of the last block of where Telegraph Avenue used to be. So Telegraph Avenue is shortened. And in case you don't know, the protesters at Berkeley usually march on Telegraph and gathered in front of the Cedar Gate. So the new establishment of the plaza pushes the entrance out to Bancroft Way, and it took the ownership of the space in front of the Cedar Gate. According to a 1962 San Francisco Chronicle article, the university officials had hoped that students with oratorical aspirations could be lured to a Hyde Park type soapbox space on Lower Sproul Plaza, away from this mainstream. However, Halperin made the Upper Sproul Plaza one large open space for social interactions in front of the Sproul Hall, which is the administration building at UC Berkeley. The place is now where most of the students' activities happen. Nevertheless, the Sproul Plaza serves as a buffer zone that frees the Cedar Gate from being a symbolic destination of the marching protesters. Even though Halperin turned the plaza into a stage of sharing words, we have to remember that the land is wholly owned and controlled by the university, who has the right to intervene in any activities on campus for various reasons, such as safety or traffic. So the idea is the same. The highway is built and we can use it for free. In 2015, the landscape firm CMG renovated the Lower Sproul Plaza with a new pavement more distinct from the previous ones. So that's the renovation after 2015. You see how the Lower Sproul Plaza has a completely different pattern from the previous one, which is similar to the upper plaza before 2015. So with the new pavement more distinct from the Upper Sproul Plaza's pattern compared to the previous one, and the wide staircase that connected the upper and the lower levels of the plaza had given more than half of its width for two sets of ADA ramps with vegetation that screens some of the turbulence from the top. Besides carrying the Sproul's name, even the places themselves are dissociating themselves. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't have, better accessibility. We shouldn't have ADA ramps. Those are essential. I'm just reminding us that what had it taken away. Okay. So my conclusion is, my goal here is not to make anyone hate or stop making changes to the built environment. Quite the contrary. It is to express how powerful and dynamic design could be. By analyzing the dialectics of the improvement, the paper discusses that the formalization of a desired path is not simply a story of people's will being recognized and officialized, but also about removing a path by paving it, which exemplifies how invisible the dispersion of control is in the everyday life. There is much more to discuss on the dynamic strategies versus tactics in everyday life expressed through the built environment. This discussion right now only introduces one alternative aspect of design criticism and experimentally draw attention to the ubiquitous but usually unnoticed power control entangled in the design development. Hopefully more critiques of everyday design and preservation of unrecorded history can find their way back to the mainstream design discussion. Thank you so much. Questions, comments? Yes.
I don't have any questions, but thank you. I see a lot of parallels with your work and sort of heritage of space in general, particularly of your description of sort of the sense of completeness and changelessness that superimposed on landscapes that are fluid already, and I really appreciate that actually in my own work. But I wonder if you've done so connected to the folkloristics of power. Have you also done ethnographic work for this project, or are you thinking about that as a potential resource?
Yeah, great question. To be honest, I solely developed this idea for this conference. It has very little to do with my PhD work, but I do plan to integrate part of this tactic versus strategy concept into my future PhD work. And I do plan to do some ethnographic work, yes, but I haven't done much. Yeah.
Hanqin, I would just start, and please pursue it as a topic, because I think your presentation reminds me of Robert Useful's comments about there's nothing as invisible as a memorial, right? So the thing that we actually intend to try and formalize actually subverts the actual kind of cultural memory that's embedded. And especially when you think about pedestrian speed sacks that you mentioned as a strategy for kind of the formalization pathways. I was just wondering if you looked at Henry Lefebvre and the social production space, because I think that, like, especially your last slide where you're talking about free speech zones, like, I think that directly impacts what the interpretation of these spaces are.
Yes.
So just as encouragement, like,
yeah, absolutely.
I think that there's a lot here to impact that I think is important.
Yeah, I came across Henry Lefebvre like 100 times, but never had a chance to read more about it.
It's always the curse of PhD student. You're always going to want to read.
Yeah, appreciate that.
Other questions? Yes.
Kind of building on that, and not so much the academic side, but more on your urban planning area. But I would love to see the incorporation of like hostel architecture, because I think that there's a great dovetail there, and I would love to see where this goes.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yes.
All of this is about social control, and design is social control. And I was talking about this earlier, and how sometimes that our biases and our thoughts influence like our design and control. That's what this desire has. You know, that we as humans created humanity and stuff like that, and we're like, oh, well, let's just make it so many people walk on it, and then it becomes bureaucratic. And that's, you know, we control the narrative of the design space. Like, and that's really interesting. Like, with the hostile architecture, like, and the free speech zones and stuff like that, it's how much design is about control and stuff like that for us as well.
Exactly, a good point. Especially that it's not the planners or designers or the architects intentionally implemented control in their design. It's just like both parties, the receivers like us, the users, and also the designers from the top. We're all trapped in this system and in this habitus that we just take things for granted. We just follow the system. So it takes critiques. That's why I'm trying to introduce like critiques into this before it's too late.
One last argument. Let's go back at the teams.
Oh, yeah. Well, it just occurred to me that the Nurses Garden took those desired paths and traced them and put back as therapeutic. Just thought of that. That we saw the plan before they restored the Nurses Garden. See the desired paths that they formalized and then they took away and put their intention.
I noticed that too, yes.
Last round of applause.